I'll introduce myself first, but my name is Jackie. I'm your host. I go to Yale. I'm a freshman. I'm here for the summer. I'm actually here in the library right now, but I'm part of the class of 2026, and I'm interested in studying political science and psychology. And then we can hand it off to each of our guests.
What's up, y'all? I'm Brick. I'm currently attending the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a rising sophomore, so class of 2025, and I'm currently studying computer science, but want to throw in business as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Donut. I'm currently attending the University of Maryland at College Park. I'm studying business, specifically information systems and business analytics, and I'm a rising sophomore.
Okay, hey guys, I'm Vampy. I'm currently a rising sophomore at NYU, and I'm in the liberal studies program, but I'm going to be transferring into Stern hopefully next year. And I'm studying finance and computer science, or econ and computer science.
Okay, perfect. We're just gonna dive right into the questions. You'll learn a lot of, about each guest, and if you're ever curious about anything, you can drop a question in the chat, and then if we do see it, we might add it to the queue. Okay. So the first question is about social life. Do kids at your school try to have fun and party? And you can see all the questions in the live question feed, the channel. And I'll pass this to Brick first. So do kids actually try to have fun and party? How's the social life at your school? And you can say the school before you answer, in case people forget.
All right, in case you forgot from like 30 seconds ago, I go to University of Pittsburgh, but yeah, it's a state school, so a lot of kids party for sure. There's definitely a lot of fun going on, but if you don't want to partake, that's like totally cool, and if you want to partake, it's also cool as well. So it's really, you can just get used to whatever you want, and it's a lot of fun to be had for both ways.
Donut?
Yeah, so I'm going to second what Brick said. You really can choose your social scene. There are parties that you can go to. There are, you don't have to go to parties or like chill hangouts. So the social scene is basically what you make of it. And I know that's usually the cliche answer, but it's kind of, it's how it is. So if you want to seek out stuff, the opportunity is there. But no one is going to like peer pressure you or force you, like you have to go party every single night.
Yeah, I'll just follow up like what they said. At NYU, I feel like the options there if you like want to go seek out those opportunities, but there's definitely not any pressure to do it, and you can make friends just fine who don't party and who don't participate in that stuff. Yeah.
Sorry, seems like Jack. Okay, Jack's back.
Did you hear me at the academic part?
No, we didn't hear anything.
Okay, sorry. The Wi-Fi, like school this expensive, I'm surprised it doesn't have good Wi-Fi. But I was just saying, what's your favorite class? Brick.
All right, so this is like a really nerdy answer, so please don't judge me, but like I took discrete math like my fall semester, and that was so fun. Like it wasn't fun seeing everybody failing, but like, you know, that was so fire. Like all the logic and stuff like that. Like it's like a required class for CS, and like it's like the class that everyone always hates on, but like trust me, bro, it's actually kind of fire. So like if you have to take it, enjoy it. If you don't have to take it, maybe consider taking it. Maybe don't though. I think it's a fun class though.
Donut?
So, sorry. All right. So for me, so fall semester when I entered, I always knew that I thought I didn't want to do anything with computer science or data at all. And then fall semester, I got to take a class where we learned how to use R and R Studio. And if you guys know what that is, it's basically data analytics software. And I found that I really enjoyed data analysis and visualizations. So I don't know how fun it was. I mean, learning, it was a difficult class, but it definitely like opened my eyes to something that I'm really interested in.
I guess I can go. So my favorite class was a philosophy class, and it's for the core like credits for my program, and it's called Global Works in Society in a Changing World. And the professor really encouraged a lot of critical thinking and like your own opinions and arguments for philosophical like beliefs and where we stand on different topics. So I think it was a good change from a lot of the other philosophy classes where we took a more traditional approach of like studying the text and not having our own insights. So I really enjoyed like being able to argue my own thoughts.
Sorry. What drew you to your major? Do you have a reason why you picked your certain specific major?
So for me specifically, like this is gonna sound like really nerdy. I'm so sorry, but like in like ninth grade, I took a computer science class, and like let me just tell you, that was my calling. Like when I saw the print statements, I knew that was for me. And like I'm like literally not even kidding. Like after that day, I knew I was gonna be a computer science major. Trust me, it wasn't because I knew about the salary or whatever. I literally didn't even know what it was, and I was just like, I want to take computer science. And then like that was actually what happened. And then I pretty much knew I was gonna be computer science. And like even though my major is technically not declared yet, like in most schools you don't declare. So I think your junior year, I don't think that's what they do at Pitt at least. So like I'm not declared computer science, but like I'm 100,000% going to be computer science. And for business, that was just like I like business stuff, and I figured I might as well just add something computer science because computer science by itself is kind of lame, but like with business, it's kind of fire. So like, I figured that would be fun.
All right. So for me, I actually changed my mind about my major a ton of times. So I applied to college as an animal science major to basically every single school that I applied to. And then I realized that that wasn't going to work for me because I didn't really want to be a vet. And it was a long story. But basically, I was like, you know what? Business, I'll be able to like make a career out of that. And I was really interested more in like the techie side of business. I was like, information systems seems pretty interesting. So I started out with that. And then after that course I took, a data analysis course I took fall semester, I added on my business analytics double major. So that's how I ended up here.
So for me, I'm kind of like Brick. I already knew what I wanted going in. I knew I wanted to go into business as like a career, but I wasn't really sure like what major to use for that because I didn't think I'd get into Stern. So I thought like economics was kind of similar, and I found it really interesting. So pretty much just doing like any business or like finance path was just like my goal. And I added on computer science because I felt like having a technical degree would help like diversify my skill set and like job opportunities. And I also took like a AP Comp Sci class in high school that I thought was pretty fun. But I'm not sure if I want to major in CS anymore. I might just want to minor in philosophy. So still changing kind of my trajectory.
Perfect. So how did you? Some people do have like pre-existing interests, like you did in high school, but how did you pick your classes? How did you end up making your schedule? And did you use any like helpful resources like Rate My Professor or anything else?
So as to pick classes, so specifically for computer science and a lot of other majors, I know one big one is like engineering. Like they have a very rigid schedule structure. It's a kind of similar for computer science, at least at Pitt. Like you have to take a lot of the same courses, just like, and it ends up being that pretty much everyone in the same year usually ends up taking somewhat similar classes unless you have like a lot of AP credits. So I had like 23 or something like credits coming in. And so I was able to skip like a couple classes, but besides that, I had 3 like core computer science classes that like I kind of had to take. Like when I met with my advisor, they're like, yeah, you got to take these. And I was like, okay. And besides that, I had to choose electives, and that was definitely the more fun part, like navigating like stuff like that. And the way I really figured that out was you have to check your like requirements for your school. So at Pitt, I'm in the School of Computer. I don't even know what it's called. It's something. But like that one has like a bunch of different requirements, like humanity requirements, communications requirements, and you basically just choose like what you want to do out of those. And what you're going to learn is as a freshman, you have really bad like priority in terms of like registering. Like you are not going to be able to be like, oh, well, actually, I don't want an 8 a.m. No, you got to take like 8 a.m. And so you're going to end up taking like some classes that you don't really want, but you just got to take what you can get and just try and knock out those credits. But then as you level up and go to the different years, you can basically choose like more stuff that's a little bit more interesting and also just have more flexibility.
All right. So at least at Maryland, I remember when I was signing up for my first semester classes, I was so confused. I thought that I would never figure it out. But for me, it was a little bit different because I I was in a couple programs and they all had their requirements. So for making classes, what I recommend is going through all the stuff that you're a part of, like whatever school you're a part of, if you're in any scholars, honors, whatever programs, and literally write down exactly what you have to take and figure that out first. And then you can plug in all your electives and stuff. And yeah, as a freshman, you have pretty bad priority unless you have priority registration through like an honors college or something. But I will say that one of my tips is finding classes that can knock out multiple gen eds with one class. Like, for example, all of the classes that I've had to take through my honors program have knocked out more than one gen ed. So I was able to finish all my gen eds really quickly, even though I only came in with like 15 AP credits. So if you can find those, I would say I recommend doing that. But obviously, if it's something that's totally out of your interest zone, don't force yourself to do it just because it knocks out more gen eds. At the end of the day, I think it's more important to enjoy your classes. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of classes that you have to take that you might not enjoy as much as you would electives. So don't force yourself to take some classes just for the sake of knocking out credits, would be my advice. And Rate My Professor is great. Use it a lot. And sometimes schools have an internal professor rating and course review system. So at Maryland, we have this thing called Planet Terp, which only UMD students can like put in professor reviews and all that stuff, and it's specifically about the classes at UMD. So that is like my go-to when I'm making my schedule because it has everything.
Kind of similar to the other two, I had the same experience, but specifically for my program, we had like a set structure of core classes. So for both of my first and second semester, I had 3 core classes, which is quite a bit because there's only like 4 full class credit slots available, so I could only have 1 left. And the goal of my program is that it's 2 years long and after we transfer out. So the last core class had to be allocated towards our prospective college, like future college. So in my case, that would be transferring to Stern, and the backup would be CAS. So I had to take micro econ, and the second semester I had to take math for econ. So really knowing like your program or your major and those requirements will like prevent any issues like later on. So what I did was I created like a 3 to 4 year long like planned out all of my courses for all of the years, which is kind of overkill, but I think like knowing a general idea of your pacing is really important so you don't accidentally take like a fun class your first semester and you have to like double up with like an extra class later on, where like maybe you're a junior and you have to like do job applications or something like that and you don't want extra classes. So there's that. And then for the electives, honestly, I didn't really enjoy the electives I took because it was more work and stress than when I was trying to pursue like extracurriculars. So I think it just added on work and I didn't really enjoy it that much. So I think really trying to like pace how much work you're adding onto yourself and whether or not you should take like extra classes, because the extra elective ended up being 18 credits, which is the maximum. So I think like just being aware of how much you can handle at once.
Question. Brick or Donut can answer this, but why did you pick honors? So what pushed and motivated you to do it?
All right, so for the honors college, I think I just applied because I genuinely just thought like when I was applying to schools, like if there's an honors college, I might as well just apply. So I was just like, you know what, I might as well just apply for the honors college. And for Pitt, it was just like 1 extra essay, so I figured I might as well. And I didn't really understand the benefits too much. Like when I was first applying, I honestly just thought it was just like, oh, I'm in the honors college and you're not. Like it's just like a flex thing. But there's actually a good number of benefits, especially like specifically at Pitt and at other like state schools that you get from being at the honors college. And I think the biggest one that we get specifically is priority course registration. So after my first fall semester, I get like number 1 priority as an honors college student to register in basically any courses. So like that means like I can get literally any course I want at any time. And like that may not like sound that like crazy to you, but like I know some kids at like other schools that like literally like it's like a supreme drop or something like that when courses come out. People are spam refreshing, like people are just trying to get their courses, and then you end up getting stuck with like an 8 a.m. with a trash professor. Like that is really annoying. So like if there's an honors college option at your school, definitely try and pursue it and see what the benefits are. And I also wanted to do it because of extra scholarships, because at Pitt I know that even after you get to school, you can get a lot more scholarships if you're in the honors college, and I think that's how it works at other honors colleges as well. But for me specifically, Pitt had one like really big honors college scholarship. It only goes to like 10 kids or something, and it's like a full ride. I didn't even know it existed. And then when I applied, I learned that I got it, and I was just like, okay, I guess I gotta go to Pitt now because that's so fire. But definitely check out what the benefits are. It's super underrated usually for honors college, but I think the priority course registration is definitely like a huge thing it's like really important, and it really drove me to apply at a bunch of different schools. And I think it's just something that if you're already going to school, that maybe you should try and transfer into, because those policies usually exist as well.
So at Maryland, the honors college is really weird, and the one thing I am still upset about is that honors college students at Maryland do not get priority registration, and that is like the worst part about it. But at Maryland, it's set up super weird. So we have the big honors college, and then within the honors college, we have like 7 or something, or I don't know how many, but a bunch of different programs. And some of them they require you to live on campus. I'm a commuter student, so I was planning on commuting, and there's only one program that doesn't force you to live on campus. So I chose that one. But my reasoning for choosing it was, you don't even have to write an extra essay to be considered for it for Maryland. So everyone is auto considered for the scholars, the honors, all the programs. So they just wrote in the letter that I was in, and I was like, well, okay, I mean, it sounds cool. Like, why would I not take it? And it's been actually pretty great because you get to take classes that, at least for me, they knock out a bunch of gen eds with one class, and they're actually been pretty interesting, and they're like a good break from your usual classes because it's more like seminar based. And the network within your little group, your program within the honors college, is actually really great. Like, we have socials all the time, we have events, we can talk to people. They send out a bunch of like scholarship opportunities that you wouldn't get if you weren't on the email list for that honors program. Some sections for classes are only specific to my honors program, so like other sections are specific to other honors program, and it's only 2 years long, so I was like, why not do it? And it's been pretty great, except for the not having priority registration part.
Okay, perfect. We can talk about residential life. So if you live on campus, how is that experience? And if you don't, how's the commuting experience? Is it costly or is it inconvenient ever? Brick.
Yeah, so I lived on campus for my freshman year. I lived in our honors college dorm, and honestly, it wasn't great, but like it wasn't really necessarily bad either. Like, of course, like the rooms aren't going to be like super luxurious or anything. I mean, they're college dorms. But I think the main thing was like the social thing. It was really fun to be around like pretty much a bunch of other freshmen, and you get to struggle together in like the terrible bathrooms and everything. And yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good time. I mean, there's always fun stuff going on in the dorms, whether it be like actually organized by the RAs or it's just parties people are throwing. Everything's always a good time. And it definitely was expensive. Like, they're definitely trying to get some money out of you, like for sure, especially for like what you're getting. Like, story for me, like I thought I got a good deal because I got a private bathroom instead of the communal bathrooms. But what ended up happening was there were 6 of us to one bathroom. And then like 2 of my suite mates ended up actually taking like hour-long like dumps every morning. So I was literally like I literally could not go to the bathroom in my dorm. I'd have to like go run 20 minutes to the library. Oh, also my dorm was like literally 20 minutes from campus. So it was like, now I know it may sound like really bad to live in a dorm, but like, trust me, it was pretty fun. The other dorms besides like my residence building were actually on campus. And that's usually like the main big thing about it, is that you're so close to all the classes that like you can literally just like wake up and go to class within 5 minutes. And so I think it's like a good time, but next year I'm going to be living off campus in a house, which is just the better decision financially. And also, I mean, dorms kind of suck, but like, it's a fun time regardless.
You can speak about your commuting experience, Donut.
All right. So, obviously, I'm a commuter. I don't live on campus. I live at home with my parents. The reason was mainly for financial reasons. So just to save costs. I won't lie, commuting is really hard. It's exhausting mentally and physically. Sitting in traffic is not fun. And having classes before 11 a.m. if you live like more than 30 minutes away is awful because you have to also account for parking, account for walking to your class. It's really exhausting, but I mean, I try to make the most out of it. So, what I tend to do is I tend to stay on campus basically like a full day from whenever I get there until the evening. And I've joined clubs, and I hang out with my friends. So, and I like study on campus. So I basically only go home to like eat and sleep. And that has helped me a lot with like, getting to know people because obviously you meet a lot of people if you're dorming on campus. It's a little bit harder as a commuter, but you just have to make sure to put yourself out there. And it does get annoying, and if you commute, you're gonna hate it. But I think that at the end of the day, I'm still able to have a pretty good college experience. I just have to put maybe a little bit more effort in than people who live on campus, since I have to like base my schedule around commuting, and then also like I don't have a dining plan, so I can't just go and grab some food with my friends. And it's really nice if you have a friend on campus or around campus that you're friends with, and they'll let you crash at their place, like if you're studying late or something. So that's nice as a commuter to have. So you really got to put in the effort and make it work for yourself if you're commuting.
So my experience living in an NYU dorm, I picked the cheapest one, so it didn't have AC. And they're actually like installing AC now, so I got like the last of the cheapest dorm. And not gonna lie, the New York summer with no AC was kind of rough the first month. So like we got a bunch of fans, and that still wasn't really enough because it's just hot air blowing at you. So like I think my roommates just were out of the dorm a lot trying to like get AC in the library, and then I worked on my PC in the dorm, so I would just like sit and like not move, so it wouldn't be as hot, and then you just kind of have to deal with it for the first month. And I lived in a triple, so I had 2 roommates, and it was pretty nice because we all got along. But I know other people in my hall had like issues with their roommates, so just something to note. And next year I'm gonna be like living in another dorm, which is a little bit further from campus than my original one. So I think like something unique about NYU is that our dorms are like in the middle of the city since we don't have a campus. So I know some people who live like in a dorm that's further than my friend who lives in an apartment. So you end up having to like walk the same amount anyways. But the only thing is that the cost might be like kind of worth it, since if you like calculate it out, it's about $2,000 a month. And honestly, a studio in Manhattan for $2,000 a month is like a pretty good deal. The only difference is that you have like a roommate or two. But the thing about NYU is that we all have private bathrooms in our dorms, so it's like kind of like you're just living in a studio with a friend. So I'd say it's like kind of worth it if you want like the ease of not having to have furniture and all of the amenities. Like some dorms have gyms, and the one I'm going to be living in has like a dining hall. So I think it's just convenient.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, how did you make your friends? Did you guys face any difficulties making friends? This can be more concentrated on Donut, who commutes to school. As a commuter, do you have a harder time making friends or study groups? But how do you guys make your friends?
All right, so as to make friends, I remember I was really like anxious about this. Like before I got to school, I was like, oh my god, am I gonna make any friends? What if I have no friends? What if I sit in my dorm all day? And Rick, it's really not that deep. Like once you get there, like everyone is trying to make friends. Like everyone is like dying to not be alone. Like no one wants to eat alone at the dining hall or do anything alone. Like people just come up to you and talk. It's like really easy. Like even if you like not the type of person to approach people, which most of the time I'm not, but like I kind of force myself to be that type of person now. Just don't worry. Just remember to always be authentic and just try and be nice to people. Like just don't be like really mean to people, and just be nice, and people will be your friend. Like, and that's how I made like a lot of surface level relationships, which is really all you need at the beginning. Like you can't really expect to show up the first week and just be best friends with everyone, but I think the important part is taking those surface level friendships to the next level, which is what you got to do over the coming weeks. So just make sure you're just like reaching out to people that you've met. Like make sure to grab everyone's Instagram, Snapchats, phone numbers, and like if you're bored or something, ask them, yeah, you want to grab lunch or something? Like, are they going to say no? They're literally not. Just do it. Like, and that's really how I just made friends, just keeping that contact with people. And then like, obviously you're going to keep contact with people and some people are going to realize you're probably not going to be that good friends. But then like, that's just how it would be. Like, I mean, if I had to count how many people like I was friends with the first week compared to now, I mean, the number drop off is huge, but like, just remember that like the good relationships that you make, that you try and foster, the good ones will make it out of that. So it's just important to just keep those relationships going, like, oh, let's grab lunch today or something like that, and try and study with people and just try and hang out with people. And for the most part, you'll be fine. And I also made a lot of friends from clubs. I really only bought clubs, I say as if I joined more than one. I only joined the computer science club, but like that club was super fire. There's a ton of like really cool people there, and it was a really involved club. Like they met like once or twice a week. And there was so many events going on all the time that like I made a lot of friends through that. And it also helped that the kids that were in the club just happened to be in basically all my classes. So like that also really helped to make friends. So I definitely recommend just talking to people, obviously, and then also just joining as many clubs as you can. That's really important because although it does take up a little bit of time, you can definitely meet so many cool people. And if you really put yourself out there and join something that you may have not wanted to join, you might meet some people that like you normally wouldn't have been friends with. And that's what I think is like the best part, because like the people that I'm friends with in college compared to the people that I was friends with in high school, obviously I love my high school friends, but like it's just a completely different group, and I really enjoy that I've made that variety, and I think that's really important.
All right. So for me, obviously the process was a little bit different because I mean I commute, and for me the biggest thing by far was clubs. And I'm not talking just academic clubs. Like I joined the boxing club and I met so many great people there. Yeah, it scared me at first and it was terrifying because, you know, I thought they would beat me up because it's boxing. But they were some of the nicest people ever, really great, just awesome. I think it's really important to find a club that you enjoy participating in and just be consistent about going there. If you want to make those relationships with those people that you really like, you do have to be consistent. You have to put the effort and you have to make the time, because friends aren't just going to appear magically out of thin air. But that being said, just like Brick said, everyone just wants to make friends at the beginning. Like I walked into one of my first classes, I remember, first day of freshman year, and the guy who was sitting next to me literally turned around and shook my hand and introduced himself. So, everyone just wants to meet people. No one wants to be alone. It's not difficult if you put the effort in. It's just a matter of actually putting that effort in. And I will say that it's really easy to doubt yourself and to not feel confident like you can make friends, but I promise you, if you just go in there and put your best foot forward, you just talk to people, you find like something common that you share, have a conversation with them, and then just keep in touch, and that'll grow. Like they'll introduce you to their friends, and soon you'll have like a whole group or something. And clubs is the biggest way that I did that, and it can be academic clubs, athletic clubs, social clubs, whatever. Clubs are really the way to go, in my opinion.
I definitely second the clubs. I made a good portion of my friends from there too, because I'm in like a business club and we really spent a lot of time together, like in my team, working together on different things, so you get really close through that. Mostly I didn't really have much issues making friends. I feel like since I tend to like only want like a smaller circle, I didn't really feel the need to like expand too much, especially since I got along with my roommates and we're all like kind of besties. So it was like just living with your friends like 24/7 anyways. So it wasn't really difficult to like feel like I was alone or like that I needed more friends than I already did. But I think if I hadn't been like best friends with my roommates, I would have had more issues and would have made more like efforts to hang out with people outside of class and things like that.
Okay, real quick before we move to the next question, I just forgot to say this when I was speaking. Donut said that during one of her classes, someone just like turned around and introduced himself to her. That just reminded me, like, I literally made my best friend, like, that I think, like, throughout college and probably like for my whole life so far, literally just by spot introducing myself to someone in my computer science class. Like, I remember for my first week of fall classes, I literally told myself, I'm going to talk to everyone that is sitting next to me, and please do that. Like, it was painful for me to be like, okay, I'm going to say something to this guy, but like, it really worked out. Like, just try and think of something to say. You don't have to be like, hey, you can just be like, hey, or whatever. But like, for me personally, I like to start with something that's like more specific to the person. So I remember the guy that sitting next to me, his name is Jack. He was wearing like a really busted pair of Converse, and I was like, nice shoes, bro, because I was wearing actually the same like color of Converse. And then we're literally best friends now. And like, if that doesn't prove to you that like, just talk to people, like, please just do. Just like for that first week, make sure you're just trying to talk to everyone. And I'd be lying if I told you that every single interaction I had that first week with the people around me was good. Like, there were times when I literally like talked to someone and sitting next to me, and they were like the most dry person ever, and like they were super boring, and like that's okay. Like, I'm never gonna talk to them again. Who cares? But like, I made that one friendship, and that was totally worth it. So please just make sure you're talking to people in your classes, and also it's super helpful. Like, you guys can work on homework together, you guys can study together. It's all good.
Perfect. And speaking of like tips, do we have anything that you would recommend freshmen do in their first year of college? Or do you have anything that you did the first year of college that you would do differently?
Definitely, I would recommend everyone join at least a couple clubs. I mean, we already said that, but I would also say if there's sports at your school, try and go to a sports game, even if you're not really interested in sports, just because that's like a really fun atmosphere, especially if you go to like a state school. Like, it's really cool. Like, Pitt specifically, like, we're not like super good at football, but like we ended up being actually pretty decent last year. And I've always been a sports fan, so I knew I was going to go to the games. But like, I kind of forced some of my friends to also come to the games that weren't like really interested in it, and it ended up going really well. And I'm really happy that I ended up buying the tickets for that, because it's just a really good experience just to see everyone together, just looking at how bad this sports team is, or if they're really good, enjoying it. And that's really the main thing, just trying new things and stuff like that. I actually did end up like trying so many new things, so like, I don't know if I'd specifically say like if I do anything differently. I think I would want to do it pretty much the exact same, just making sure I'm putting myself out there. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I'm going to second what Brooke said about sports. That is one thing I regret, because I did not go to sports events. And notably, our football team is pretty bad. So I was like, there's no point in going. Like, we're just going to lose. But I could have gone to like lacrosse. Like, Maryland's is amazing at lacrosse. And I never went. And sometimes at like state schools, you get those tickets for free. If you get them early enough, or you can get them like discounted because you're a student. So I think definitely, if you're not a sports fan, just try it out. Go with your friends. It's a fun time. Like, there are games where people leave like halfway through, and that like kills the mood. But honestly, like, if you go with your friends, it'll probably be fun. That is one thing I do regret a bit about freshman year, and I also regret that I didn't like start putting myself out there in terms of like looking for friends earlier, because I only really started like putting effort into it almost when fall semester was over. So it took me a couple months to get into college and like start feeling like I could actually talk to people comfortably, and like introduce myself and all of that, and try to make friends. So I do wish that I could have gotten a start on that sooner. But some general advice would be just keep an open mind, because especially if you go to like a big state school, I don't know about like small liberal arts colleges, but probably even there, like, there's so many different people at college. Like, you're going to meet so many different people. Keep an open mind. Like, you're going to learn so much about different people. You're going to learn how people do things differently, how they live differently, and just keep an open mind. You know, be appreciative of how much diversity there is at your school, because there are so many people to meet and learn from at college.
Kind of not similar to what they were saying. NYU doesn't really have a really big sports scene, like, if at all much. So I don't really regret not going to anything sports related, but something that is super popular is the arts around here. So we get discounted tickets through like the NYU like events center, I think. So we have like Met Opera tickets that are discounted and things like that. So I did take advantage of it a couple times, but I wish I did more because the times I did go was like super fun. And also our dorms have like weekly weekend excursions, just doing like getting boba like around New York City or like seeing a Mets game. So I think it would have been much more fun if I had participated in those, but I got lazy. So if your dorm does have like those kind of events where like they go hiking or like they go to an aquarium, definitely go because one, your school's paying for it, and two, it's a really great way to like make new friends and get out of your school if like it's kind of hard for you to like commute like that far to other places. So I definitely recommend doing those like dorm activities or just school sponsored activities.
And okay, thank you. For those activities or other opportunities like extracurriculars, how can a freshman get involved? Do you have any tips with getting involved with them? And can you give like personal experience of what you're involved in? Are you involved in any clubs, cultural association groups, or anything else? So how do you get involved and what are you personally involved in?
So I'm pretty sure this is common at every school, but we had like a big activities fair for both the fall semester and the spring semester. So basically all the clubs would show up and they basically try to convince you to join their club. And so like I remember me and a few of my friends went, like it was like one of the first weeks. And so we went and just went to look at all the clubs. But unfortunately for our fall thing, it started like pouring, and that's like really common in Pittsburgh, but it was raining so bad like the day that happened. So like I only got to see like the thing or like the fair for literally like 5 minutes and then had to leave. But they ended up posting everything online anyway. But like some sort of event like that would usually happen in your school. And so I ended up joining, I think, like 3 different like computer or like tech clubs. I wish I was saying this before that like you should branch out, and I really wish I did, but like I think I'm going to next year 100%. But I wish I did a little bit more than just tech stuff. Like I wish I did business. I wish I did just like other cultural stuff. But I joined like 3 or 4 tech clubs. Like one was like a game development one was just the normal computer science club, and then one was just like tech leaders or something like that. And I remember I went to, I think, at least one meeting for all of them. And I remember that it was really easy to get to the meeting. Like you don't like, we didn't have like applications or anything. You kind of just wrote your email on the list, and then they usually have like a big email list and they send it to everyone where like what like where the club meeting would be. So I ended up just going to the meetings, and then the only one that I actually like ended up sticking with, which is what will probably happen. Like you're probably not going to like sign up for like 20 clubs and then join all of them. You'll probably like end up max with like 2 or 3. I don't want to go too low, but 2 or 3 seems like the most you can really do while actually like putting effort into them. And so Computer Science Club I ended up staying like a pretty active member of, and I'm hoping to join more next year as well.
Yeah, so at Maryland, we also kind of had a huge club fair for the whole campus in both the spring and the fall as well. And so that showcased like all the clubs that wanted to come out. They could be like related to whatever. Honestly, you could be ranging from athletics to like a debate club to business clubs, engineering clubs, robotics, whatever. And specifically in our business school, we had this thing called an involvement fair, which is basically a club fair just for the business clubs. So that was really a great experience for me to actually go and look at the business clubs, because for me personally, there were so many clubs at the huge, like, school-wide club fair that I kind of felt a little bit overwhelmed, and I was like, I don't think I'll see everything that I want to see. But the business school club fair was literally just like a couple hallways, and it was maybe like 30 or 40 clubs. So I just walked around and, talked to the ones that I was interested in, and I actually ended up joining a business/technology club, and then applied for an e-board position and got that. So I've been doing that. And I also applied to like the SGA of the business school and been working with that club for a little while. And then boxing I actually found through social media, so it was through Instagram. And I wanted to just note that a lot of clubs, they have an email list, but also clubs, at least at Maryland, are usually active on Instagram. So like what I did was I DM'd clubs on Instagram quite a bit, and I was like, hey, like, when are your meetings? Can I just come? Do I need to sign up? and they're usually pretty responsive, at least from my experience. And I definitely hope to join a couple more clubs next semester that interest me personally, because I'm planning on maybe dropping in the business clubs, because I think also what Brick said about 2 to 3 being a manageable amount is pretty much correct, because I felt like 3 clubs is the most that I'm going to take on if I actually want to put a solid effort into all of them. So we'll see what happens there, but I think it's always a good idea to explore new stuff and take advantage of all the opportunities, all the different club fairs that your school offers.
I was really only kind of active or like participating in clubs that were related to my major, so a lot of the business clubs. But since I'm not in Stern, they have like their own newsletter that gets sent out with all the clubs. So if you're not in Stern, you kind of have to take initiative on your own and like search out for these clubs and like apply. So I went through the application process twice, once in the semester 1 and once in semester 2. And you can technically join like these business clubs, but they all have, or like a lot of them have like flagship programs, which is what most people are like trying to get. And they have like applications. So I didn't get anything the first semester, and then I got it the second semester. Usually these applications entail a written application, like essay form, and then either 1 or 2 rounds of interview. So there's a technical and a behavioral. So those are like for the business, like the Stern Club, like actual programs, like where you're learning stuff and it's like a pre-professional program. But if you want to just join, you just go to the meetings and check if your school has like a list of clubs like on their website somewhere. And like ours, we had like lists of like the clubs and like ways to like contact or like get on their mailing list, so you get like notifications every time they have a meeting or if they have an event, which is like super helpful in getting involved and like getting to know the members. But something I wish I did was that I wish I had more time to get more involved in sports, because even though like the sports scene isn't super big at my school, there's still like a lot of recreational activities for sports. Like you could just play like recreational tennis or like the cycling team. And there was one, I remember there was like dance classes that you could take. So definitely look into your school if they have those kind of like sports activities where you don't have to do it like professionally or for a team, but just for fun. Because I feel like that's a really good way to make friends too.
Thank you. And for your first year, did you guys have any worries before starting college? What were you worried about before starting college, and did anything different happen than something that was different from what you thought would happen and didn't happen?
So personally, I was like really worried about pretty much everything. I remember the main thing I was really worried about was just making friends and stuff like that. I honestly thought it was going to be really hard to show up and make a whole new set of friends, because I mean, for me, my friend group that I was with throughout high school, I had made in like 3rd grade. And so it was just like custom for me. And I hadn't really gone through that activity of making like a complete new set of friends at like any sort of interval or anything like that. And so I was really just worried about that, making friends. I was a little bit worried about classes, but definitely not compared to like the friend thing, because I figured like the class I took in high school couldn't have been that much like easier than what I'd take in college. And that was pretty much true. And what ended up happening with the friends thing was, as I mentioned before, I ended up being just fine making a lot of friends. So it ended up just being like false worries. And I remember I was also a little bit worried about just living alone, just because I'd never done that before. But I mean, you definitely have your blunders. Like I definitely had some like very stupid things that I did, but I mean, you'll figure it out. You really don't need to worry that much, because in the end, worrying really accomplishes nothing.
So for me personally, I was really, really terrified of getting lost and then never, like, I thought that I would never learn how campus was laid out and I would never be able to find my classes. Because the first time I visited and toured, I was like, this is way too big. It's huge. I'm never going to figure it out. I was like, I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know where I parked. Had to use the GPS everywhere. But honestly, that's how everyone does it. So like the first week of classes, you'll literally see all the freshmen out with their phones with either Campus Maps, the app open, or Google Maps, literally just plugging in their next class. And it's the funniest thing ever now that like I actually know how campus is laid out and where everything is. But besides that, I was definitely worried about my workload because I had heard that college is a lot harder, obviously, and it's more work, more responsibility. And I think the fact that I was like so terrified made me work hard and motivated me to like not procrastinate because I thought that if I procrastinate, I would be like screwed. Like I would be done. I would not be able to succeed. So I like forced myself to actually do my work on time, like study for tests. And you know, it really paid off. I think that fear of failing really pushed me to work hard. And I do want to point out that fear of failing is like different in college, personally, in my opinion, because I went to a public high school, so it was free, didn't pay anything. But like I'm paying for college, and I'm like, I'm actually paying for this. Like I better, you know, put the work in because I don't want my money to go to waste.
Kind of similar to Dee Dee. When I first came, the thing I was most worried about was not doing well academically because my grades in high school are definitely not as good as I know other people at NYU. So I felt really insecure and like worried about not doing well in my classes and being able to handle the workload. But it ended up being fine. The only classes I struggled with were math. So, you know, nothing new. I wasn't surprised or anything. And there's definitely a lot of resources here. So they have like tutors that the school can provide, and they have like TAs for most classes in like STEM and stuff. So if you're like struggling, you can always go to them. So I think even though I'm still worried about next year grades, it's less so that I'm feeling overwhelmed, but more just like a normal kind of like anxiety or worry about it. Kind of similar to Dee Dee though, I feel like the fear of failure in college is definitely a lot bigger than in high school, because in high school it's like, oh no, I'm not going to get into college. But in college, I'm more like, oh no, I'm not going to get a job. So it's like a life existential kind of fear. So definitely motivates you. And another thing is I was really worried about like the bathroom situation because I heard horror stories of like communal bathrooms, and I actually like had a summer camp overnight before at like a college like Georgetown, and Georgetown has like rats and cockroaches. So I was like super worried when I was coming here, but thankfully I have not had any rat or cockroach issues, nor have I seen any cockroaches here. So I think it was just unfounded. But I did hear there was rats in the hall. I just didn't see any. So I think we're good.
Okay, thank you for sharing. I know we all mentioned a few of our worries, specifically about our academics and failing. But what was like a strong resource for you that your school offered that supported your social, academic, professional growth as a student? So what did you utilize at your school to help you succeed academically, socially, or professionally?
So I mentioned it a few times already, but I joined the computer science club at my school, and like that was probably like a lot more than just like helping me with my computer science classes. It was like really helpful in just terms of like literally everything. Like we had like a mentorship program, so basically all the freshmen or underclassmen got immediately paired with like a senior or a junior or upperclassman, and so I got paired with the senior, and he was so helpful. Like whenever I had questions about whether it be scheduling classes, like curing my worries about like where do I make friends and stuff like that, I would just ask him. And then he was also super helpful when it came to start applying for internships and stuff like that. Super clutch, was really able to help me out, and it was just really great having that sort of figure just to help you out. And while that was more like a club thing, I know we also have peer tutors and stuff like that that's made like by actually the school. And so another resource that I found really helpful was TAs, like in classes, because a lot of the time it's like really difficult to approach a professor just because the professor is usually teaching like 300 kids, especially for like those freshman gen ed classes. And So the TAs that you have in like we call them recitations, which is like every week instead of lecture, you'll go to recitation, and that will be instead of like the 300 kids, it might be like 15 kids, and it'll be to TA, and then you'd basically just get some supplemental material about the class. And so the TA is just usually a lot easier to ask questions because they're also a student, and while they do have a lot of knowledge, they're not as like scary as a professor, at least for me. So that was also super helpful for me.
So for me personally, I was a direct admit into the business school, and when you're a direct admit into the business school, you get placed like with a little group of incoming freshmen, and each little group gets like their own mentor. So we like met the day before school started, and our mentor introduced themselves to us, and my mentor was an extremely great resource, and she taught us like how to use all the career search functions that we have internally, where we can go to like get resume help, cover letter help, how like office hours work, how everything works. And she also just like was there to talk to if we had any issues at all. She like helped. She like gave us tips on like joining clubs, putting yourself out there, all of that stuff. And besides that, really take advantage of all the resources that your school offers, specifically like your college within your school. So I don't know if business schools tend to do this in general. I think they do, but at least for Smith, which is Maryland's business school, we have like internal recruiting. So we have a website that's specifically for business students, and only business students can access it and apply to jobs through that website. We have an Office of Career Services, and I've used that before, and I went to them and I've been like, hey, can you look over my resume? Can you look over this cover letter? And they'll give you feedback, and they'll tell you how you can improve it, what employers are looking for, like if you're on track, if you're doing the right thing, all of that stuff. For academic development, we have like tutors within business school, but TAs, as Rick said, are like a lifesaver, because I feel like TAs are much more approachable than professors. It really depends on your professor, but in general, like TAs are usually your age or a little bit older, so it just feels easier to talk to them and ask them questions. And our recitations are called discussions, but it's the same thing. So we had like one class a week where we just did a worksheet with a TA, and those TAs really helped a lot. You just have to like get over that fear of talking to them. But they really do help a lot if you utilize those resources.
I felt like the biggest resource that I had for growing academically and or like professionally and socially is the pre-professional business clubs that I was involved in. So they really have a lot, well, especially like since I'm not in the business school, I don't get access to a lot of the resources. So they're really big help in like improving my resume, learning how to network, and like developing actual skills that'll help me, because I feel like a lot of the stuff I learned in class was not applicable like in the real world for the job I want. So I think clubs are definitely like a huge resource to make friends, to learn new things, and like expand your interests. And also just like if you like need help with like math homework, there's definitely an upperclassman I could call who like could help me like with math homework. And like literally one of like in the club we had to like do different homeworks and things like that, and some of like the upperclassmen members like would help me when I was like struggling. So definitely like utilize resources like clubs when you can. And I think just your like professor is a really good way to grow academically if you have a really good professor. Because the one for the philosophy class I was in, she really helped me grow like my critical thinking skills and really challenged me to think like differently and try to see things from another point of view. And be friends like with your professors, I think, is like the biggest advice I could give on that front. Because you never know when you need like a teacher like a recommendation from a professor. Because like to be like a student leader, you need like a nomination, or you need 2 recommendations from professors, at least at my school, which I didn't know until I was like applying and I got a nomination. So you never know when you're gonna need a professor to be like a friend or like a way to help you like in your career and like academic journey. So really try to like get to know them.
Perfect. And this is a final question because time is cutting short, but we want to end off on something positive. So, can you tell us something that you like about your college or like as a college student in general? What did you look forward to when going to college? And if you have any hidden gems or something underrated about your college that you like.
Okay, so I can not stop talking about how awesome Pitt is. So like, I'm going to save you guys all of it, but Pitt is just so awesome. I really love it. Everything is really great. I just really love that, especially at my school. Like, and this is a big like pro in general, just for like state schools or larger schools. There's just so many people here that you can really just find your people, and I really enjoy that. And one thing I love about being a college student is you can just really do whatever you want. Like, if you want to eat ice cream for breakfast, I mean, you're gonna feel like crap, but like you can do it. Like, that's so much fun. Like at home, like with my parents, I can't do any of that stuff. Like, I'm basically just back to just being like a kid. But like when I'm in college, I'm a full blown adult, and it's super fun. And so, I mean, that comes with pros and cons. Like, you got to be responsible, but at the same time, when you want to have fun, you can have fun. And I think that really just sums it up for me.
For me personally, my favorite thing about Maryland has to be the campus, because even though it is under construction, basically 24/7, 365, and it's ugly construction, when the construction isn't there, it's very pretty. And we have McKeldin Mall, which is actually one of the biggest national malls in within U.S. colleges, and it's basically a huge mall. And you have a library at the very top, and we have like a water fountain that flows through. And it's just great to hang out there with your friends. Like, I've had so many picnics there, and those like are like memories that are going to stay with me. And in the summer, people literally sunbathe there. In the winter, it gets all beautiful and snowy. And the campus itself has a lot of hidden gems. There's like a little chapel, and there's benches and a little garden around it. And the benches, under the benches, there's like a bunch of little cards, I think, and people write down like confessions on the cards. And it's like interesting to go and read those, and it's super quiet and peaceful. And you know, the sunsets are beautiful. I really like the campus.
I do like my college so far, and it was pretty much everything I wanted in a university. I really wanted to be in a big city with no campus and just like focus on like my career and pursuing like my personal interests. So it pretty much let me do all of that. The only thing is that the financial aid is non-existent, but other than that, it's pretty great. And I think some underrated aspects is like just the proximity of being close to everything in New York, because like we're like in downtown Manhattan, so I could pretty much get anywhere in Manhattan like within 30 minutes or 40 minutes. So I think it's like super convenient, and you can definitely like experience like different things like the arts or any sports events. And what you lose in like school like culture and like campus life, I think you really gain from being in the middle of the city.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up our AMA today. For those that didn't have their question answered tonight, we'll keep that for the next AMA. You can check the pins of the chat to sign up for that one, and we'll have different guests. But I want to thank everyone for coming, especially our guests for talking about their student life experiences. But I appreciate everyone for staying on, especially with my connection problems. But that's the end of tonight. So I thank you all for coming again, and I hope you all have a great day or night. Bye bye.